Okay.
Hello, Bob.
Hello, guys. Good to see you all.
Hey, everyone.
Hello. There we go. Now I've got you all.
I had a panic that, oh my God, were we supposed to be in person? So I was looking through
Well,
as I was waiting to
Hey.
get in.
No, we're okay for the moment to continue meeting like this, unless Lauren tells me there's been yet another change. I have one of my first meetings where I'm meeting a large number of people tomorrow. It's nerve-wracking. We'll all be dressed like spacemen, so I'm sure it'll be all right.
Oh,
I went to a baseball game at Washington with the Washington Nationals last week, and it was comfortable. It was outside. You're not right on top of anybody. I did not take the metro to go there, though. I drove.
I actually flew on vacation, which was kind of nice. And so, I sat around. It was a short flight down to the Outer Banks.
But that's your private plane, Joe.
Well, no, I flew on your private plane, Bob. Thanks for that, by the way. I appreciate you loaning that to us. It was really nice of you.
Yeah. You have a rich family.
Bob will do that for anybody, so just ask him.
I think
Noreen,
we
is that
may
you?
need to do one of our meetings this fall somewhere in Vermont. We'll fly up there. How does that sound?
Yeah, it sounds like
Yeah,
that's
okay.
perfect. Noreen, is that you
Finance
on
committee
the?
would approve that.
Yes, yes, it is me. I'm sorry, folks. I'm in the car, but I'm in Boston, but I'm here.
Well, I'm not sorry you're in Boston. It looks like a lovely day for it, but that sounds all right.
Don't get distracted, Noreen.
So, Lauren, hi, Lauren, how are you? So I should warn you guys, I'm in a room and there are 2 sleeping golden doodles. So they will sleep only so long. So if I suddenly have to disappear and you hear barking, I'll be right back. So why don't we start off? Do we have any members of the public that are attending and would like to say anything?
There are none.
Well, that's what you get for holding an August meeting, Lauren. Do we want to talk about the minutes from last time? I think if I recall correctly, we don't have minutes from last time because the meeting was under quorumed.
Correct.
But
Sorry.
we would have meetings from the prior time. Is that right, Lauren?
Yes.
Because we couldn't approve them. So I'm sure everyone remembers back.
Make a motion. No, go ahead,
Please
Joe.
do. No, I would never stop a motion to approve.
And I'll second that.
Motion approved from 2 meetings ago.
Excellent. So we've got Noreen and Matt. Any questions on it? Liz, do you have anything? You're usually our best minute reader. All in favor? Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. I always like this. We've done work. And we'll be sure to take a left on Bestoro Drive or where it is Noreen's going.
Right.
So you want to jump right into it and start?
So the next item on your agenda is to set the public hearing date. We
Oh, you're
had
right. I'm
narrowed
so
it
sorry.
down. That's okay. To October 21st or 28th. They are both Thursdays and everyone was available both days. So it's really just whatever your preference is.
Anyone have any reason for one or to other?
I mean, the sooner the better. I would say the 21st is good.
Yeah. All right. The 21st it is. So let's give that a whirl. Excellent. Now are we back up to review?
Now we're back up to review. I'll get my share screen going.
Excellent. It's unnerving how easily it puts a transcript on the bottom of my screen. I'm using a different
Yeah.
thing. I don't have it displayed normally. I feel like I should give it hard things like the syzygy of the lunar cycle is showing up. Okay.
It's interesting because sometimes it chooses the wrong word, which can be very entertaining.
Yes.
Sometimes it chooses the very interesting word.
Yes.
It's gonna be much worse when it chooses a word that you wish you would have said, like, oh wait, chooses it makes better choices.
I'll just switch these around.
At the light, use the right lane to take a slight right turn onto Reedsdale Road.
I'm so happy. Liz, if I could nominate you, unfortunately, because I'm not on my regular computer, actually I'm on an iPad, I can't put it in gallery mode at the same time that I'm looking at the shared screen. So if you could just maybe keep a queue for people to speak, would you mind doing that?
Sure.
Yeah. So if you can handle that piece, because I can't see everybody.
Okay. So 4.2.2 is where you guys ended at the last time, duties of the first selectman. We made some changes to this section, and I think the one before it, for the whole board.
Mhm.
Yep.
And now we are at delegation and assignments of duty, 4.2.3.
Got it.
And once again, are we saying officers? Did we have that? Did we redefine officers to something else? Department heads versus officers?
Yeah.
I don't.
Trying to think
I'm
about
having a-
what we did.
I'm having a hard time remembering, Joan. I think we talked about it. I don't remember us coming to a decision on that.
So we changed agencies to departments, is what we did under 4.2.2A.
Well, maybe we could say officers, comma, department heads, right? Or town employees, because there's certain things that are designated to specific town employees, like HR things, correct?
So, if I recall correctly, this is right about the point where we started to talk about the now defunct town treasurer, right? As to whether an employee versus an officer. Lauren, I would suggest maybe that we should just revisit the terminology and to either to town employees or designates, I guess. And then if you see any reason that officers is required, we can maybe also flag that for an IRA question. I just want to make sure there's not some reason that people are declared officers. I was thinking vaguely about the my recollection is that the zoning enforcement official is an officer because they have enforcement powers and actually carry a badge.
Yeah, and
go
I
ahead.
think you're right, Joe. That's ringing a bell to me, is that the charter actually designates officers as like the town clerk, the tax collector, someone else. Like it does actually use the terminology of officer, I believe.
Yeah, I think those people have the power to do things, in terms of but they have direct power with citizens. I don't know whether that's the distinction, but I think that might be right.
So section 5.1 gives you elected officers, and it has the first selectman, four selectmen, registrar of voters.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
there you go. So maybe we just add officers.
And then
Officers.
7.1.1 has town officers, and that's what Joe and I think are remembering: tax assessor, director of health, town clerk.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think you keep officers in, but do we add employees as well? Because for instance, don't we delegate to the director of HR?
We delegate a
lot of the-
lot to the directors. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
okay.
So maybe directors second to officers and to,
To employees.
to employees.
Yep.
Is there any occasion where a selectman would designate authority to a non-employee, non-officer?
Good question.
You know, I'm trying to think, would you ever take, you know,
Well,
a
the attorney, town council,
yeah, but usually, you know,
Oh.
usually,
Employee, aren't they?
no, they're just retained.
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
They're providing a service.
Yeah, I don't think we would delegate duties to them. I think we would get them to advise us on what we should do, but I don't think we would have them do the thing. Does that make sense?
But then you've got to think about future sharing time of employee and sharing employees percentages. That's why I'd like to have the employees in there, because even if we're doing job sharing with even the Board of Ed or even another town, because I know that they're talking about the town planner type of deal sharing with Guilford. So we want to make sure.
So riddle me this: if I form an ad hoc committee, if I'm first selectman and I form an ad hoc committee to investigate something, use of petty cash, something like this, and I give them the authority to review items and report, am I designating authority to them? You know, when would you ever give the authority to, you would never give contractual authority. When would you ever give authority to somebody to fire someone or put someone on administrative leave or command employees to do something, but they're not an elected official, they're not another town employee? Is there any circumstance that would be like that?
There is a history there of the Beach and Rec Commission and the chair actually negotiating a contract. Remember that, Joe? They negotiated the contract and we said, oh, no, I think we need to look at this again.
Yeah, I think maybe that's the example that says, don't expand.
Yeah, I think employees and officers and to the other selectmen are one thing. And once you go outside that, I think you'd want to have approval by the Board of Selectmen or, to say like the ad hoc committees are formed not necessarily by the first, but by the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah. All right. I think that's fine. I think maybe, Lauren, let's just again flag a question. That could also be a perfectly good IRA question, just to see, since they've advised a lot of towns. Is there any obvious thing? Does bond counsel act in a way that's different? I just don't want to miss something that happens. That's kind of regular, but we're not thinking about it.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on this section? All right. Next we go.
That seems pretty straightforward.
Has it ever
Vacancy.
Has it ever happened, by the way? I agree with you. I don't think anything changed. I'm just curious, have we ever lost a first selectman? Or if any of them said, boy, this job's terrible and run for the hills?
No, I mean, they all just stick it out, miserable as they are.
All right, so this one I think looks all right to me. Any comment on this one? I mean, it's 45 days. I know that's short. We've been trying to lengthen things, but I think in a case like this, you really want to move quickly.
No, it's fine. Again, removing that reference to section 3.7, which we have on the left-hand side, right?
Yep.
Right.
All right.
Yep.
Okay, so the selection of acting first selectman, it says within 30 days. Now, what did we talk about when the actual first selectman takes office? Did we change that?
We did December 1st, if I recall, or the first meeting in December, forgive me.
So I think we referenced the first meeting in December then. The same thing should happen because it's potentially the first meeting in December is 30 days after election day sometimes.
So we didn't actually put that in. Is that, did we actually change? I don't know if we actually changed it.
Let's go back. So the left side is the one, right?
Yeah.
4.1. Mm. 4.1.1. Oh, that's just
Okay.
add December,
That's
the
just
second
at
meeting.
December, yeah. No, that's just the meeting schedule.
Yeah, I apologize. I can't do my usual scroll along thing.
Right.
While Lauren's hunting, is the idea that it's still within 30 days after the first takes over?
So the
I mean,
first selectman shall become a selectman for the duration of time between the first Monday after the election and the first Monday after Thanksgiving, when they will commence as first selectman.
So we
So
didn't.
it'll
There
be, it's within 30 days, so that should be, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
we went to the
It's-
first Monday after Thanksgiving, which
Could be in November, could be in December.
number, but it should, if the election's on a Tuesday, it should still be 30 days within the election day, and it's always on a Tuesday.
Yeah. So we could also make that just within, 14 days of assuming office for the appointment of the acting first selectman.
Right, it's usually part of the first meeting, so yeah.
Yeah, but that way, if we're assuming what we've always known is that a first selectman shows up, they know everybody. It's possible that a first selectman could come in and this is the first time he's meeting the group. Then they have to decide who's the acting. So how about within 14 days of assuming office? Does that sound okay?
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. They're highly unlikely you take office without knowing any of your
Yeah.
board of selectmen.
Yeah,
I would-
I'm also just thinking, like a lot of things, it's not the first thing on people's minds. If I recall correctly, when I was appointed acting first selectman, was the, hey, you know what we need to do? I think it was shortly after your election, Noreen, I became acting.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
As acting first selectman, my powers, once I got to help cancel school, and once the DEP had to call me to tell me that they were euthanizing a bear within our borders. Those were aside from
Oh, I
that, it was
remember
first-
that one. Oh,
I know, it was
That was a
terrible
sad one.
call. I know, the answer was, I said, well, is there anything I can do about it? And they said, no. I'm like, so you just have to let me know. It goes, yeah. I'm like, okay. So I was on a walk with my dog at the time.
As I
Howard,
recall, right after you were named, I'm sorry, I can't raise my hand or anything, but right after you
Yeah,
were
sure.
named acting, didn't something major happen that you had to make some decision? I feel like it was happening at town hall outside. I just remember that you had just taken the job and
I'm trying to remember. I don't know.
I mean, it was I remember calling me and saying, "Are you kidding me that this is happening on my watch the first day
No.
or first week or something?"
I know what it is, Noreen. You're reversing it. You were acting for a selectman. I was away watching CNN, and there had been a police incident in Madison that I saw on the TV from Florida. I called you. I remember that
That
one.
I don't remember.
Yeah, it was over on Wall Street.
I don't remember that. I'm going to stick to that. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, that's too bad. You handled it beautifully. So the powers of the acting first.
I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, is there anything, maybe if any of us could think about the emergency powers, and Lauren, is there anything new that's happened that would change this? I mean, I don't immediately see it, but I don't want to leave the
Yes.
section.
So here's what, as staff, I think would be important or helpful. Right now, we designate, and this is not written clearly here, it just says, that the person will serve when so instructed in writing by the first selectman. Right now, the current precedent that we have in town campus is that if the first selectman is going to be more than 30 minutes away for more than 24 hours, they designate the acting first selectman to serve in their, in their absence. And the reason why we did that is because that is the parameters that we use for allowing employees to take home a town vehicle. They only take home a town vehicle if they are responding to things after hours. That, would be the fire marshal, the building official, people who would have to respond if something happened and that live within 30 minutes away. So we do that right now for the acting first selectman, kind of because it was the only thing that we had as a practice to hang our hat on. But that mainly was when there wasn't Zoom meetings and email and ways that somebody could still serve in the capacity remotely if needed. So this was, kind of in a time, it was set up in a time when we didn't have Zoom meetings and a first selectman might be across the country and unreachable. But in this day and age, when people have cell phones and text messaging and we're a little more available, it kind of seems silly that if the first selectman's going to go to Cape Cod for the weekend, that they would sign over the power and authority when they're completely reachable. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it doesn't say in the charter, that's just kind of the procedure that's being
Yeah,
followed.
so it's something that we talked about internally, just like, should we put a little bit more into the charter of parameters? So maybe like when so instructed, but it must adhere to, if the person's going to be gone for so many days, or if the person's going to be so many miles away or something.
Well, could I ask one thing is that, so thinking about the way the weather map looked on Friday was giving me flashbacks to our Irene and Sandy. If we were to have a sudden storm, but the first selectman is out of town, like when does the first selectman need to be here physically? Emergencies are usually a big one because communication gets disrupted.
Right.
So if there's a declared state of emergency and the first selectman's out of town, shouldn't you activate the acting?
Yeah, and that's under C. So when pursuant to section 10.1.3, that the board of selectmen shall declare that an emergency exists and the first selectman cannot be reached.
Yeah, I guess I was going for, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear, because the state declared a state of emergency, and I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit. So it would strike me that part of the problem with that is you're assuming you can trigger a quorum. You know what I mean? When these things happen, things can be, particularly in the summer, it would be very reasonable to have had, Peggy out at the Cape and somebody else on vacation, and now you could be quorumless.
But didn't we say that when there is a state of emergency in the state, it's an automatic state of emergency now? Remember, we were going to put that in there?
So will that trigger? So in
then that would
10.
trigger C.
Is that in 10.1.3? Because if so, if so, you're absolutely right.
10.1.3 talks about state of emergency in the town. But yeah, if we make it so that, whenever there's a state of emergency in the state, it automatically triggers one in the town, then yeah, it would.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was going for. I'm trying to think of, because Lauren's really right. I mean, it's a little bit different now.
Go to 4.1.4.
4K. Yes.
Yeah, this is not quite what I'm going for, right?
Right, but I think we need to
put it here too, I think.
Yeah, I think we need to talk about the state there because
yes,
Yeah, a state of emergency, I think, should be when the state declares a state of emergency or the Board of Selectmen declare a state of emergency.
Correct.
Or, right, and if that reflects this, then under either of those scenarios, if the first selectman's out of the town borders, then you go to the acting.
Right. Then, yeah.
So Lauren, maybe you can sort of,
Mm,
just go and mutatis mutandi. You can kind of update the sections. Is there anything else the first selectman has to do physically these days? Is there anything that's unique to their presence aside from ceremonial duties?
I'm sorry, the in-person stuff?
Yeah. Is there any? I'm trying to think. Is there anything that uniquely requires the presence of the first selectman, particularly these days? So emergencies was one, but that's kind of all I got. They don't need to sign the town budget. I mean, I'm trying to think, is there anything, specific, particularly that requires them to be physically present that would automatically trigger the acting first selectman? And the fact I can't think of it sort of the only thing I had was emergencies.
Mhm.
All right. If so, any other thoughts on this section? And then Lauren, if you could take care of the emergency thing, then I think we could move to the next one. And I just have a question as to why this is charter. As a longtime pension liaison myself, why is this in the charter at all?
Well, I think if it's not in the charter, then basically there could be a designation where someone other than selectmen are running those meetings. And I think because it's a fiduciary responsibility for finance of the pension, I think you want the selectmen, somebody on the Board of Selectmen to be the designation.
Yeah.
And chair it, right? Because it's either that or the Board of Finance. To me, one of the two boards needs to be the chair there. You don't want it to be somebody that has skin in the game, so to speak, to ensure that these are being correctly administered.
Yeah.
If the first selectman picks their designee, and is it now the acting selectman that does it?
For the pension
can't
liaison, if I recall
No.
correctly, it was
Right.
just like any other assignment. You found out who did it.
Yeah.
Right, because it's also something that it's good to match people's expertise up to. If you've got somebody on that would really be strong from either the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance, we'd give that option then to have the first selectman pick them.
Yeah, I think that's why Fillmore stuck me on. I'd had some exposure to that kind of thing before.
Right, and I
Well,
think
took
Al's
over
been on for a while now too, so.
Yeah, and
And
Al's
I
done that
think
in other contexts too.
And I think like Charlie Walsh was doing it and then found out that he wasn't able to do it because of, I think his regulations with his business he's in, and I took it over until, I don't remember who took it, but we just didn't have anybody else at the time.
Yeah. I think
And we
that
have a
kind,
Yeah,
we have a
I'm
community member too. Is there a community member on it too?
if I
so.
recall correctly,
Madison's still on it.
yeah.
So the question here, and I think it is a good question, that the membership, whoever the chair is, I think maybe since this is a fiscal committee rather than a policy committee, should it be really under the Board of Finance?
Good question.
Because that was what the notes were. It's not my
Yeah.
question, it's in red.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It beautifully put, Joan.
Well, thank you.
So I from my standpoint, I would leave it with the selectmen because a lot of the decisions are decisions in equity and not finance, right?
Okay.
You have to just, you know what I mean? You have to decide on coverage, There are things that come up occasionally that don't strike me as financial involved, but like, for instance, the firemen, this is a key benefit. And you need to decide what's fair and permitted within the structure. So I'm sort of under the, it's not broken, then leave it alone. My question was, does it need to be charterized? And I think you're right, Joan, that it should be. Anyone have a counter suggestion to that?
Nope, I think we're
Okay.
good.
Sounds good.
Excellent.
I would
Now
love to be able to put the stipend into the compensation for the rest of the volunteer selectmen. Right, Noreen? Go back to the few $100s a year. I don't know.
I could have a question about 4.5. I mean, you don't want to get into these bizarre hypotheticals, but let's say next week the Board of Finance says, we can save the town some money. We're going to set Peggy's compensation at 0.
That's a real example, Bob. Another town, and I can't recall which, they zeroed out the salary of, I think, the mayor, and I'm trying to remember which town it was, but that's actually happened. Was they lowered? I thought
it was
I
Simsbury, and it was something political, I think.
Yeah, but it was some dramatic act involving the compensation of the person in office.
It does seem to me that the question of positions being voluntary or compensated is something that probably should be in the charter. What do you guys think?
I thought that was on the Board of Finance regulations, those things, aren't they?
No, I mean, they voted to increase, but they could turn around and vote to decrease in any budget year if something political got up. So I think
I had led the charge to increase the compensation on the first selectman from, I think, 75 or 78 to 125. And actually I wanted it, I think that was the number. And I wanted it much higher, and it was only done through budget action. So
right.
conceivably,
and it's actually went down to 100 in reconciliation. So it's, so I think,
but the Board of Finance each year can set the first selectman's compensation. I don't know what they do as part of the budget, but they're the ones that set it. Which obviously you don't want the Board of Selectmen doing it.
Right, but I think Bob's point is that any way to run a rodeo? Because now you can go and, railroad. Is that because conceivably then the Board of Finance can crater the salary for their friends and increase it for leave it alone for their friends and crater it for their opponents. That doesn't happen, but it is a little odd that the charter lets it happen.
So the Board of Finance regulation actually only lets them do it every other year, and it has to be an election year. And it's not effective. I want to say it's effective in January. So it doesn't affect the current first selectman. It affects whoever is elected in November. And that could be the incumbent or it might not be. So that regulation is specifically written so that the person currently in office is not like dictating the salary, if that makes sense, for themselves for their second year of their term.
Though I wouldn't take comfort from that, because the Board of Finance can change their regulation during the term.
Right.
So maybe Lauren, you're onto something. Maybe we should move that regulation, which is not a bad one, and pop it into the charter.
Okay.
Do we know what the note here that it needs to be consistent with constitutional provision?
That was just Ira's note, and I think mainly he just didn't want us to say like, hey, compensation can be $1 million.
But I wonder what why don't we copy over the Board of Finance one, but let's ask Ira, make sure there's not something else within it.
This is a really basic thing, having a paid first selectman and voluntary everybody else.
Right, but a lot of times the voluntary, everybody else gets a stipend. So like, for instance, when you're sitting on the Board of Selectmen, you get invited to a lot of events that you have to pay for out of pocket. If you have $1,000 stipend, that really, or I think at one point in time, it was up to 5,000 and then it got reduced to 1,000 and then it was completely removed. I think that stipend is helpful. You're traveling quite a bit. You're representing the town at town functions, and you're invited to a lot of fundraising activities for anywhere from nonprofits to, different organizations within town. So I'd love to see something that there is stipends for the Board of Selectmen and even a minimum in there. But
what happened was exactly what Bob brought up. It really was a squabble between a couple of people, and the Board of Finance took 25 years ago. It was $3,500 a year the selectmen got, and then it was actually a squabble over chairmanship or something, but they were going to kind of get somebody back, and they lowered it to, I think, $500, and then eventually it was ridiculous at $500. They got rid of it. But I think, as I brought up other times, most of the towns around us, the selectmen, all the selectmen get something. I know in Guilford they get $15,000 each. I'm not sure how much Durham's is, but a lot of the towns do. We supposedly did a study of it, and I don't think the study was ever done. This is going back way years, but it did happen. That $3,500 did happen, and it was to pay for just what Joan just talked about. But it was definitely a Board of Finance being mad at somebody from the Board of Selectmen. That's what started it all.
I'd like to be able to put in a stipend no less than this amount to the Board of Selectmen volunteers.
What about something like this, that the board, the members, because it is a very high engagement board. And it meets during the day, and you have other meetings during the day, and it's just a lot more engaged than others. What about something that says they will be paid a stipend and then of 1% or 5% of the salary of the first selectman? That kind of thing.
Is that a job, or do we want that in a charter, or is that?
I was just going to say.
Well, I think if you don't put in the charter, it can happen again, that the Board of Finance can get mad and take it away. It's like.
I don't know if the charter can have a budgetary impact. Does that make sense? Because this is creating an expense for the town. And I don't know if we can charterize that. That's something I would want to look into. Let's put set in charter.
Well, we charterize a lot of things as far as maximums and minimums for.
We charterize what triggers other actions
Town
or
meetings.
checks and balances, but we don't charterize spending something, a certain dollar amount. Does that make sense? Like, this is actually creating a budgetary line item. Right.
But I think somewhere along the way, there must be a stipend that is commensurate with, and it can't be like a few $100s. That's.
Yeah, I think we can put in language. I just don't know if we can actually put in a dollar amount. I think we can put in language about, making it a little bit stronger, and I think maybe we want to put something in like, unless changed by town meeting, something that, God forbid, the town can't afford it in the future.
Good point.
Gave an out.
Yeah.
Right.
If we can, I do agree with what Joe was saying, and this was, an idea that Joan brought up meetings ago about, spending money for the Board of Selectmen, but a percentage of whatever the board of, the first selectman's making. I do like that idea.
Maybe Lauren, you're onto something. Maybe the charter could suggest sort of like we did somewhere else in terms of how that they shall be paid a stipend, approximating this, however set in absolute by town meeting. And that way it's out of the hands of the boards.
So the Guilford does have a minimum salary for their first selectman. Now granted,
charter?
it's $6,000 that was declared in 1955, and that hasn't
Such
changed.
a deal.
Such a deal. They
Right.
have,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, there is a minimum per annum for,
I actually like the idea of setting some kind of floor and then maybe giving the out saying unless modified by town meeting.
right,
For any particular budgetary year. So the default is the charter, but that way you've got something out, you've got a way out of it in any given year.
yep.
I'd like to think about the town meeting.
Yeah, the vote of the electorate.
Yeah, that's a town meeting. That's how
Yeah,
that's how we change everything right now, unless we change this charter completely, which
Yeah,
I thought we weren't gonna go
okay.
down that road.
Yeah, that way it's out of the hands of the board.
Right. Yeah, let's try to look at a minimum. Yeah,
And we could calculate what the current salary is compared to I don't know. We could set a minimum of some percentage to the budget. No, I don't know about that. Actually, that's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
That in theory incentivizes increasing the budget on behalf of the first selectman. That's an awful idea. Sorry, that sounded good for a second, but no. Okay,
yeah,
so
I mean,
so Lauren, if you could get around your budgetary
Yeah.
pieces, but maybe what we do is we set, something that runs like this, that the first selectman shall receive, copy the Board of Finance language for the
Yeah.
mechanic to change it. And then include language that the first selectman shall receive a salary no less than whatever it is, $100,000. And, unless modified in any given year by town meeting, and the members of the Board of Selectmen shall receive a stipend approximating, I don't know, what's fair,
5%.
5% of the Board of Finance, similarly unless modified by town meeting. And that way they
Well,
get
I
$5
think-
grand for that.
Well, are we modified? So or referendum, because if Board of Finance
Yes.
suggests increases, then it just goes in the budget referendum and it's done.
Yeah, well, I think we're setting a floor. If they recommend increases, that's fine. So they
Right.
do whatever they do.
Okay.
Though sadly, Noreen, I think a $5 grand here in 2021 is not nearly the equivalent of the 3,500 you had back in the day.
For sure.
I mean, I think we got to take baby steps and then move for the Board of Finance to do that increase for people.
Well,
I-
most people are going to think this is a new concept, and it's not. But
Right.
But I'll tell you, you're going to have people say to you, "Well, wait a minute. How many hours did the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen put in?" Or I think a lot of the
Board of
conversation
Ed.
was happening when the Board of Ed, I meant. A lot of this conversation, as I recall, once these two people that were squabbling over chairmanship, one of the issues they brought up was all the time P&Z was putting in on the airport when Leland was here. And you guys were having amazingly long meetings. as I recall. And I think
200
that-
hours of hearings, if I remember, Noreen.
Oh my
Total
God.
with that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's all that we're going to hear. So you're right. Exact baby steps, I think, are very important.
Well, so I mean, look, let's see. We'll go to open hearing. If I would hate to have this, something like $15,000 of proposed expenditure get in the way of the charter language. I'm personally much more invested in protecting the first selectman, because I think it's an important piece for both equity and professionalizes the job.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm personally not as strong on the stipend for the selectmen, but I think it's a good policy, not one I personally would, live and die on that hill.
Right. Well, we can come back.
But we're not gonna have this issue, because we're not gonna have a charter go down because of one issue.
You'd be
Right.
surprised
You would be
historically on referenda that, one thing just stands out as
Well,
abomination.
we can also, highlight the issue to get town input. We'll have to do a lot of outreach in the fall. And we can talk to the selectmen, but why don't we sort of propose it now and see what we think about it later.
Okay.
Excellent. Are we now out of the 4s and into the 5s?
Woo!
Uh-huh.
And I feel 6 is coming fast upon us.
Yeah, it's just about 5:45.
So for Article 5,
So the first thing in 5.1A is conversations that came from the Government Study Committee. And that is the idea that the loser, for lack of a better word, on the run for first selectman right now, if they still have enough votes, become a member of the Board of Selectmen. And so the question was, or the suggestion was, changing that so that they cannot de facto become a member of the board. But that's definitely something that you guys should talk about.
Yeah, I think there's two ways of looking at it. The top 5 vote getters are the top 5 vote getters, and those are the people who should be in office, period,
Yep.
end of sentence. The other way to look at it is the first selectman wins, the other person running for first doesn't get to sit on the board, and the other people running for the Board of Selectmen would go.
I mean, I only caution it because like this year on the ballot, there's only 5 people running for Board of Selectmen. So if whoever doesn't win for first, right? Is there 5 or
No,
is
there's
there
6.
There's
There's
6.
6.
Okay.
Yeah,
So then 2 elections ago, there were only 5.
correct.
And so,
But there wasn't a contest of first
for
selectman,
first, yeah.
right? So it didn't matter. It was an uncontested Board of Selectmen race.
Okay.
I'm sort of under the impression that if the person who loses for first selectman and has a lot of votes of a lot of citizens, so people and voters thought a lot of voters thought you're pretty swell, but just not as many. Then I don't see why the charter would deny that person. If they don't want the job, they can step down and we have an appointed process.
Yep.
But otherwise, you've got somebody with a lot of votes. I'm not sure it's a problem that needs to be fixed. If I think about it in recent times, usually if someone doesn't want to be a selectman, they leave. Or if somebody who does want to be a selectman, Al's been sitting for years, and I think sitting pretty well, and he's been a selectman for a long time.
Right.
So
and he
I'm not so
lost
sure.
and stayed on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Lost
It's
his
not-
Fillmore.
It's not a problem if not that many people are running, right? But mathematically though, it becomes a problem when we have multiple, more people running for selectmen, right? So for first selectman voting, everyone in the town will vote likely for one of those 2.
Right.
If there's 8 people running for selectmen, then only 4 get you vote for 4 or 3, however many you vote for. So the mathematically the loser of the first selectman will almost always then by just
Right.
have more votes than anyone else. So if we're
that
trying
vote,
to
that vote is
entice,
diluted. Yeah.
right, if we're trying to entice people to run, I'm not sure that having the person who loses a first selectman election automatically be a selectman. I'm not sure that's the way to go. But if we are worried about not having the numbers for people running, then yeah, I guess we can leave it as is.
Maybe
May
throw
I
out,
just add something? In the last 25 years, it wasn't unusual for the person who lost the first selectman's race not to get enough votes. But our town has gotten more balanced now, and And in 25 years, the first person that ever lost and didn't serve was Tom Scarpati. And since then, 2 more people have done that, have not served. That's just 3 times out of 25 years. So, you know, Al seems like in the last few years, one of the few that stayed on. He actually is very typical of what we've been doing for a quarter of a century. I just feel really strongly that it's when people vote, their votes should count. And if you vote for, if you think someone's good enough for first selectman and doesn't get enough votes, I would hope they'd be able to get a seat. I think it would discourage people from running for first selectman.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
there is, let me throw out, this is my political scientist hat, nothing tied to experiences here. But look, right now, if I'm a member of the House of Representatives and I prefer to be a senator, I need to realize that if I run for the United States Senate, I will give up my House seat and I will not be in Congress. So what it means is that if you're a Board of Selectmen member and want to participate and think you're doing a good job, you have to think twice before you run for first selectman if we change this, because then you are out. So
Right.
it seems to me we should
Right.
probably keep it as it is.
And I think that allows the people with experience on for being on a board of selectmen to then run. So like I ran, I lost, but I stayed on and would have continued to still be on the board had I not had a personal issue, you know, with my dad that I needed to resign. That was like one of my hardest choices because I knew I wanted to stay and I stayed for like a year and a half. So I think I think you get on the board, you see how it works, you see what you potentially could do differently and how you'd like to do a change. And then if you don't get it, then you're off out of it completely. I think that stops people with experience for running for first, is the opposite side of that.
There's also the case where somebody runs, they almost make it, right? So now they're on the board. Now they have 2 years of experience on the board and they can iteratively run again, right? We see that at the federal level all the time. And now they to your point, they're experienced, but they're also really interested.
Mhm.
You know, I'm kind of in favor of this is a weird thing. I get it, but we also haven't had bad experiences, right? I mean, Noreen, unless you tell me otherwise, we haven't had any spoilers. You know, I think some people, you know, served for a little while but didn't really like it, but then they just, you know, they left after a few months. You know, but there wasn't I don't know that there was a problem in having the losing first selectman if they were the incumbent now become a selectman, right? That's the other part of this we're not talking about. That seems, you know, the tradition has been actually, I think, pretty excellent.
Yeah, and then if they chose not to continue to serve or got some other job, so to speak, because they need to have a job that pays, then that's fully appropriate for them to say, I can't do this, I'm going to resign, and have somebody else in their party take over for them.
Yeah, I don't know.
But you're right. That's a good point.
So, so can we have a sense about you know, leaving this be? So, I mean, you know, I don't know if we want to straw pull it, but you know, does anyone feel very strongly we should move it the other way? I'm personally in favor of leaving it alone.
No, I would do a straw poll to say to leave it alone.
I agree.
Agree. Agree.
Yeah, I disagree, but it's not something that I'm that strong about.
Okay.
By the way, Dave, I want to be clear. I get your point on running on the other side too. You know what I mean? I think you brought up you bring up an issue that's important. I'm kind of just thinking the balance of problem goes the other way. But you know, it could also be in 5 years, we'll look at this, we'll have problems, be like, well, that was wrong. At the moment, I
Yeah,
think
if we
this is a
can
better
start getting 4 and 5 people from both parties to run for Board of Selectmen, my suggestion would be to expand the Board of Selectmen rather than continue, but it's not an easy thing to get people to run for.
Yeah, I want to be clear, if there is anyone out in the public actually watching us, and I don't know if there is, I highly recommend running for the Board of Selectmen if you're at all interested. It's
I do
actually
too.
fun. It is a lot of work.
It's a
It
lot
is
of work,
fun.
but it's really rewarding. I do too.
Yeah.
Do we have anyone
and
who
I-
watches us?
And I'll say, when I think it's been the most difficult and when selectmen have left, usually they've been incumbents who lost. And that is hard. I think Al was one of the exceptions that he stayed. But I think that's not that it's been a problem for the board, it's been a problem for the individual. And as Joan brought up, it could have been that they needed to have a job.
Yeah.
So they had to, start to worry about insurance and paying the rent. So I think I'm really in favor of leaving it as is.
Anything else within section 5, or can we charge into section 6?
Woo, we are flying. Sorry.
All right. Well, I feel we have to start section 6 at 2 minutes to 6 because that way we started section 6. But why don't we start with the first preamble about it? And Lauren, do you want to tell us about the elected boards, what we're doing in this piece?
So there isn't much that you are going to do here because these are basically prescribed by state statute, which makes your work on this section a little bit easier. The only note that we have here is just the terms starting Monday after the election as following with the selectmen, or do you want to make the terms different like we did with the first selectmen? And then
I
do we
think
wanna
the Board of
actually
Education would have a
charterize?
really big problem with that.
Yep, and so, yeah, I think that we
Mhm.
talked about that when we had that other conversation. So I think when we talked about it, our idea was just to put something in there that made that clear. This is when the term begins, and then that the chair is chosen at the first meeting by a voting majority of the board, which is the practice of the appointed boards and commissions. And I just don't know why we haven't, it's not in this section for elective boards.
Okay,
Is
so it's elective. We want to change elected to elective, right?
Yeah, I mean, so, and this prior section too, as may be required, there's some changes throughout the document that are just like, let's stop being so wordy.
Yep, got it. Okay. So
why is it elective instead of elected when the other one's appointed? Isn't that asymmetric?
The other one
Is
is
the other one's not
appointive,
Oh,
and it's
Yeah.
interchanged throughout the document. Sometimes we use the ED and sometimes we use the IVE, and it's not consistent.
well, Lauren, you are hereby endorsed as the head of the committee of style. The act, that was
wait
the
a
actual
second.
name for the Declaration of Independence. But okay, go ahead.
Does elective mean we can have it or not? Where elected means that the members are elected. Let me look up what the word elective.
well,
means.
elective is as of pertaining to voting or elections. Elected is a verb. I just looked it up, and as nouns,
Oh,
I've got,
yeah.
so that's the thing. It's really, it should be the adjective versus the verb. So one who is
Well-
elected is a noun. And then the verb is you're elected versus the adjective is elective.
But the second meaning of elective is chosen by the patient rather than urgently necessary, as in elective surgery.
Right.
So these are elective boards. We can have them or not have.
No, this is pertaining to, the first one is or pertaining to a voting or elections. That's where
That's the
ours
first,
get,
right, yeah.
the first one
So there's
pertains
two
to what we're
meanings
talking
of
about here.
elective.
Or we could just say boards that are elected.
Boards
I-
whose
I'm-
members are elected,
Hmm,
that would
Okay.
clarify it. Boards with elected members. That would clarify it.
I'm finding all sorts. I'm consulting the world of the Google, which of
Yeah,
course makes me an
that's what-
expert. You know, and
Wikipedia.
I-
Look at that.
yeah, exactly. I'm finding a million references to elected boards, and the
Right.
only elective ones that came up when I hit the button were in Connecticut.
Of course.
I will point out that elected boards, I've got it in Brookfield, Woodbridge, Andover. So I mean, there's tons of them here in.
I kind of
in
like
Connecticut as
elected
well.
versus, I like elected
I like
versus
elected
elective.
too. If we're just gonna have one word, I'd go with elected.
Yeah, it feels these boards are.
That's
I'm
not
gonna
the-
change
we're gonna have
everything
it or
then
not.
to elected.
Yeah.
Elected.
I feel if this commission has achieved nothing else, that we can settle this dispute within the confines of the document.
Okay.
Oh, my God. Okay.
I feel really good about this. So in this section, you know, what's our discretion? Because I just as a general proposition, if we're having an elected board, they need a place in the charter. Correct? I mean, that seems,
Right.
I guess they don't necessarily have to if there's statute, but they should.
And all of
most
these are these are the ones that are elected.
So
Zoning Board of Appeals, Board of
yeah,
Assessors.
I mean, there are not to put too fine a point out of it, but we do have some discretion if we wanted to mess with the structure of these. But for the ZBAs, you know, we're treating this as an elected board.
Mhm.
I believe in theory we can appoint a ZBA.
Oh, I
but-
didn't realize there were 4 alternate members on ZBA.
Yeah, I think the reason you don't realize that is because it's particularly hard to fill them.
I know, trust me.
Yeah.
There actually
So-
are not 4 alternate members. There are only 3. That is per state statute. And that is one of the changes that you need to make in the charter.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay.
I missed that entirely.
yeah. The other exciting part about it is sometimes it doesn't have 3. You know, it's a
There were
very
two,
good
there
point.
were 2 for the last 4 years, so,
Yeah, exactly.
but now there should be 3. I think,
We're getting it fixed on Monday, the 30th. I promise we're fixing it.
Okay.
Yep.
So
and they're gonna continue to go forward. We're gonna have a minority on
these-
that.
ZBA, even if we had the ability to appoint it, and I haven't gone back to look at the statute, it should be elected. It's a board of equity. It's designed to function when the zoning rules aren't fair to a particular landowner. So that makes sense.
Okay,
Want to
And
skip to the next one? Anything else we should worry about in this one, Lauren?
Just going back up to section 6 in broad, do you want to add in the language about the term start dates and the voting majority setting the chair at the first meeting?
Oh, absolutely.
Good.
By the way, Lauren, on that point, could we make it clear that it must be voted, the chair must be re-voted after each election? That was vague in some of the boards as to when you have it reappointed. That should just sort of be the first order of business for all the, just clarify it.
all right, so unless this is the Board of Selectmen.
Right,
because
it's only
we've
the
just said
boards
that the
within
Board of
this group.
Selectmen's chair is not voted on until the second.
The Board of Selectmen doesn't have a chair.
Chair is automatically the first selectman.
Right, but they
Yeah.
don't take it on the Monday after the election, per what we just changed earlier.
Well, but they already have, they have the prior first selectman still in place.
Oh, okay, so let me,
Are you talking about terms more so, Joan?
Yeah.
Yeah,
the terms are commencing on the Monday following the election, and at
election.
the first meeting of the elected board, chair is chosen.
But I think we're okay because it says, in addition to the Board of Selectmen, there shall be the following elected board. So I don't think
Okay.
the section applies to the BO.
no, this is
Okay.
everything in addition to.
Okay,
Okay, so I'm all on board with that top language, personally. I think that would clear things up a little bit. And maybe if you guys have a few minutes, maybe we can just tick through a couple of these, because I think our discretion is somewhat limited. And then, you know, we can move on. So Board of Assessment Appeals, again,
Yeah.
it's an equity board. It's 5 members, requires people.
Yep.
Section
Board of Ed,
6.3 for,
can't
I'm
really touch.
assuming, Lauren, that that language A is right out of the statute.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then BOF, maybe my dreams of completing section 6 quickly are about to fall apart.
So, yeah,
I
this-
think
this one
we start fresh with BOF next time.
Yeah.
Now we start.
All right, I yield to that. Do we have our next? It's a good work. Look at us. We're clocking our way through the document.
Mhm.
Yes,
Do we have
indeed.
our next meeting scheduled?
We do not.
So when would you guys like to meet? I personally go through a 2-week period where I become extremely busy with the beginning of the semester. So I'm just like an unattractive human being to be around. You know, while I get a little busy.
Can you
I
guys still
could-
hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, for some reason, I'm getting an error code. Okay, that's okay.
Joe works hard to drive students out of his class.
It's true. It's
Yeah.
so I was going to suggest perhaps, you know, maybe would we want to do it on are we still good on Tuesdays, or do you want to move to Thursdays? Does anyone's schedule change?
The third Tuesday of the month is no good for me.
Tuesdays have been,
No, that is good for me. Yeah. I take it back. I'm fine. I should have shut off before. I should
So-
thought be with my mouth engaged.
So would we like to try the 14th? Would that work for everyone?
Works for
That's
me.
good. Worked for me.
Okay, so let's meet then. If possible, could we schedule a slightly, I feel the end is upon us, and I'm wondering if we could schedule an hour and a half that day. So maybe we can make, Lauren, you're making the greatest face. Is an hour and a half not
Sorry.
good that day?
I have a Board of Selectmen meeting at 8 a.m. this morning, that morning, which means I get here at 7:30, which means I leave my house at 6 a.m.
Okay, so
So
let's,
if we could not make have a 14-hour day that day, I would really appreciate it.
how about,
Well, I think we
Thursday,
should
the
charter.
6th? Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead, Joan.
Thursday, the 16th then, or,
Yeah, Thursdays are, I am always all for a Thursday. Thursdays are great for me.
Thursday the
Works
16th is
for
Yom
me.
Kippur. I don't know if that affects
Oh.
anyone
Oh, yeah.
else.
yep,
So,
okay, so never mind.
I personally could do. Let's bear with me 1 second. I'm just looking at my own calendar. Thursday, the 23rd is a big wide open block for me. Does that work for anyone else?
which day is that, Joe?
Thursday, September 23rd.
Works for me.
Works
Good for me.
Yep, same here.
Okay.
And would you guys be okay if we maybe stretch the time on that one a little bit and see if we could take a chunk out? Because I think we're moving fast now.
Yeah.
So perhaps would you be comfortable with a 2-hour meeting?
I'm
that be okay?
good, but is,
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, let's not do that a lot, but I think if we can kind of give this one a sprint, then
mhm.
then let's see how far we get, because
And
we've
plus,
got the
we've got a big break between now and then too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Right.
okay.
Right.
So yeah, so let's do 2 hours then.
Thursday, the 23rd.
That sounds good.
All right,
Great.
excellent,
Right, guys.
good. All right, so Lauren, thank you for speaking up, so we don't get a tired Lauren.
Right, right.
I
Yes.
mean, more tired than I normally am.
Okay. Great, Lord.
All right, everyone. Well, good. Well, I'll see you in the fall.
Thanks,
then.
guys.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
All
Bye,
right,
everybody.
Great.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Everybody.